Hi there, and welcome back to Direct Edition. I'm your host, Dave, from the West Coast Davengers. This is a podcast about everything. I just happen to sell comics. I run a YouTube channel called West Coast Davengers, all about comics. But this podcast is about anything and everything. Today I'm presenting you my interview with the legendary Todd McFarlane, aka the Todd Father. His resume is insanely impressive, but to me, he is the reason why I really have an appreciation for art. He's one of the reasons I really got into comics at a young age. The reason I really started collecting toys, because he started McFarlane Toys. His creation Spawn and the founding of Image Comics pretty much changed comics forever. And he's just absolutely a joy to listen to. And I finally got the chance to talk to him on this channel. It's kind of a goal that I'd been after. I wanted to really dig into some great questions with him, and I really hope I did it justice, and I hope this isn't a one-time thing. We chatted for about an hour and a half, and he was just super gracious with his time and his answers. And you know Todd from something. You know, even if you're not into comics, he directed music videos for Pearl Jam, Do the Evolution. He directed Freak on a Leash by Korn. He did the album art for Follow the Leader. He directed a video for Disturbed, 2 or 3 of them for Ozzy Osbourne. The Spawn animated series was on HBO in the 90s. It's still one of the greatest animated series of all time. Every time that I think there's a point in my life that I wasn't ingesting something that he created or is part of, I figure it out. I'm like, oh yeah, this came out then, and I was reading this, or I was watching this, or whatever it is. The Spawn movie came out in the 90s too. The soundtrack for that was amazing. So Todd's just been a creative genius and an inspiration throughout everything. He transcends it even into sports. He owned a piece of the Edmonton Oilers at one point, famously bought the Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds baseballs. So he's just been everywhere. It was really tough for me to narrow down the questions. So I asked what I could. He was really gracious with his time. He's got a big year on the calendar, so look out for all that cool stuff. Spawn 350, 7 new books from the Spawn universe, all the DC Multiverse toys, and hopefully a Spawn movie announcement. So sit back, enjoy this chat with the Todd Father, Todd McFarlane. There he is, the Todd Father. How you doing, Todd?
Good, Dave. How you doing today, bud?
I'm great, and I would love to start this off by telling you an anecdote, little story.
Sure. Sure.
You're the reason why I read comics and I appreciate art. I was born in 79. I was 12 when I started reading your stuff, but when the pandemic hit and you would just kind of come out with the record-breaking 301 and you got the DC license, you started doing a wave of podcasts, and I had lost my job. I became a mailman in Seattle. And I was listening to you on podcasts almost every day, and Cartoonist Kayfabe was the one that really struck me. And I said to myself, you know what? At some point, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm going to have Todd on. And I quit the post office. I started my own business.
Wow.
I've started running this YouTube channel.
I would have tried to cure cancer first, then do that second, but okay.
Well, you know, my love of comics has always been there, and I want to just say thank you for that, and thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Well, congrats that you put yourself out there, set out a goal. Again, when people try these kinds of things, they're not always easy, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't know if you're ever going to succeed if you don't try, right? So failure is not. I've never ever been disappointed in anybody who tried something and it didn't work out. It's the people who didn't try that you just want and then complain. Right? It's a weird thing. So in this situation, glad you tried something and it seems to be working for you, and hopefully you'll be able to keep that momentum and just keep growing and growing and growing. So hey, good on you. Good on you.
Yeah, and I wear my love of comics literally on my sleeve. You know, I've worn it's an ode to the old 1960s Batman. I got Kapow and I have Thwack.
Wow.
So, it's when you love something as you do with your art and your creations, people.
It becomes easy.
You have no option.
It becomes easy. So,
yeah.
People have asked me about like all the years I've been on Spawn and whatever and help guide it and it's like, I need it. right? I can't imagine it not being there. So it's a breath of fresh air to me. I'd be a crazy man if it wasn't there. So it's my stability in my business career.
Yeah.
So because then you mentioned the stuff when I do toys and other things, especially the toy side. I have license. You have to get approvals from people outside the house. Right? But doing your own comic book, doing your own podcast, doing your own magazine, doing all you don't have to ask anybody's permission. You come up with your idea, good, bad, or indifferent.
Sure.
And you put it forth. You learn. You never hit the ground. Day one is arguably your worst day, and you strive to get better. And then all of a sudden, if things go your way, like running a race, it's other people that tell you when you're doing the marathon that you've run 10 miles. You don't think about the 10 miles when you're running. You're going, the finish line's always in front, right? And so people like you and whatever always want to talk about the miles behind.
Sure.
To me, my best day is always in front of me. So.
Well, and in that, it's always been an interest to me, and I'm sure it is to you as a creative person, inspiration. I like to know what inspired and what came before. One of my things that I like to talk about is, well, Pearl Jam's my favorite band, right? And I've been listening to them since I could remember. But the day that I started listening to The Who, because Pearl Jam was such big Who fans, it changed me because I started to realize these are what they listen to. And then you go back and you listen to The Who and you try and figure out who they listen to form their own music. So my first question to you, I know you talk about you were kind of late in high school when you first started collecting comics.
Yeah, late bloomer. I was a late blooming comic collector. So.
What previous to that, what was your artistic inspiration? That's kind of what I wonder.
Previous to collecting comic books?
Yeah.
There wasn't any. It was, I would consider myself at that point to have been an incessant doodler. Mm-hmm. I just, if I had a piece of paper, I was drawing and there was no rhyme or reason to it. I had no accomplished style. It was just, teachers putting notes up on the board and I'm doing it. Some of it might have been functional drawings that you could recognize, and others might have just been swirly patterns or whatever else. So that was the impetus of the comic book light going off. Is that when at 16 I started looking at comic books and getting intrigued by them, that I just went, oh man, this is kind of cool. Now maybe I can focus my time and teach myself one style, which is superhero American comic books. Instead of having 15 unfocused directions, I just I'm going to put all my energy, and I'm a competitive guy. So again, I've been competitive my whole life, that I just go, this is going to be my game. Trying to break into superhero comic books. That's it. And I just got really tunnel vision, and I went in that direction. So, well,
it was a great tunnel vision to have. I mean, I know you had your eyes focused on baseball a lot, but that tunnel vision. And you know what? It kind of, okay, Todd. How does a Canadian kid who is surrounded by ice and hockey gravitate towards baseball instead of hockey?
Yeah, actually, you're right. If people know Canada, it's like you come out of the womb with the hockey stick.
Yeah.
My dad moved around a lot. And in our formative years, I had a brother, you're younger and a year older. In our formative years, beginning with about kindergarten to grade 9, my dad moved us, for the most part. We were in California, somewhere between San Francisco and LA. So we just acquired what I would call summer sports, right? Yeah. And so by the time we moved back to Canada when I was 14, you don't pick up hockey at 14. right? Because you're going against people who've been playing it since they were 4,
Right.
So, like, it was, the train had already left that station.
Yeah.
But since we had been playing the summer sports, and Canadians, because of weather for the most part, don't have the luxury of it, especially baseball, because that's an outdoor sport, right? Unlike basketball or something like that. But so the skill of baseball up in Canada wasn't very high overall compared to hockey, because all the athletes went and migrated to hockey. Although I got to tell you, a lot of the hockey players played baseball in the summer, right?
Like Lindros.
But when my brothers and I moved back to Calgary, which is where I was born, we instantly hit the ground as baseball studs. We were a cut above, because we had been playing it for years in the sunshine in California, and everybody was sort of jealous of us. And when you're 14, these kinds of forks in the road are really easy.
Of course.
You can go to the right and be a hockey player, and at best, you might basically be the guy who carries the bag of pucks, because you're never making the team. Or you can be a stud in the other sport. Like we talk about 14. This is easy. So I just kept grinding at baseball and ended up getting my university paid for.
Well, hey, and then you came to Spokane, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Spokane area in Washington is where I went to university area. Yeah. So and it's where I worked at a comic shop in the Spokane area, and where I used to go into the comic shop. So I mean, my passion for comic books was just growing year after year after year, that I just like, oh man, I got to be around this industry. So I was, going to school, working on campus as part of my scholarship, doing 2-day practices, doing my homework, sending off my samples at night. Yeah. And then on the weekends, when it wasn't baseball season, working at the comic shop and sometimes doing drawings for people in the store. So, and I wasn't able to, because I was Canadian, wasn't able to technically work in America.
Yeah.
So he would just pay me with comics at the comic store. So
it's not not a bad payment at all.
So I became addicted to it. Yeah.
So you've showed it off on Whatnot. You showed it off in art books. You have that original Spawn cover you did when I guess you were 16-ish. Your dad.
I have the whole book. I've got a 40-page book I still have that I sort of roughed out. Some of it I began inking. Somebody said, "Man, you should now ink it with your skill today and re-release the original Spawn stuff."
You should. Yeah. You should. I'll tell you. I mean, this channel is full of people that collect your work. Entire bibliography, which is what I've been doing, and people would eat it up. You would sell.
Yeah, maybe like I said, maybe that I like it. Go, okay, I just noodle away at it, and because oddly the premise of the core of who Spawn was in that book, although I didn't really pay attention to it for a lot, didn't really change, because by the time 1992 comes around and we're sitting around at our very first image meeting saying, "Hey, what are we going to do?" To me, I was always like, "I'm going to do the Spawn character," but I didn't really. This may seem odd. I didn't go back and reread that 40-page story I had done when I was 16. I remembered the romantic version of it.
Of course.
And so I then came up and, said, because it was a sci-fi, it was set in sci-fi, because when I did it, Star Wars was all the rage. So, so I said, I don't know, we'll bring it into modern times or whatever. I'm going to do this and this and this. And then I think I was probably on issue 6, and I went back and read my original story when I was 16, and I was actually surprised at how many things I had actually kept without knowing it, right? That he was burnt underneath the skin, that he was doing it all for the love of his wife and all these other things, and that there was a big malevolent sort of power that was trying to sort of stop him from just being his own man. And those are really sort of some of the big core, mile markers in the Spawn mythology. And I was like, oh man, I guess somewhere it was buried there, and it was alive. I just didn't know it because I was so involved with getting through college and then working at Marvel. And then I had, my whole Marvel career, and my head was down doing all of that. I wasn't thinking about Spawn when I was at Marvel until sort of late in the game when they started wearing me out.
But anybody that stays true to who they are inside, then those things never really leave you. I mean, you created that story when you were young, but the core, like you said, the core of it stayed with you until today. And, it's one of the things that I truly admire about you is that I watch a lot of interviews. I read a lot of interviews. You've been saying a lot of the same things for a long time in the way the value structures are. I almost kind of consider it, you have this kind of punk ethos to you where it's like you're anti-corporate.
I think, Dave, that the one thing that I've grown to understand as I've gotten older, because we should get a little more mature as we get there, that on a career side, I think I've become a pretty good manager, right? Mm-hmm. Like at the beginning, I didn't even know how to run a business, but I now understand how to find talent and let talent do their thing and help encourage it, right? Like, and that's what a good coach manager does, right? Find skill and coach it up a little bit,
encourage it,
and then help create the pathway for it to succeed. There's that. But the other piece that sort of eventually hit me was we all have our own personality, right? And so rarely, I think, if you look at, the hundreds of interviews I've done in my career, rarely do I talk about anybody else but me. Yeah. And the reason is simple. Because I don't know what motivates. I don't know what motivates you, Dave. Right? So it would be, I think, ignorant. I think is really the proper word for me to make an assumption as to why you do anything. Right? And part of it is because, again, I'm a bit of a target, and I understand it, and I don't care. It's part of the game. Sort of like it's like playing sports. Sometimes you got to play on the road and the fans are booing you, right? I always thought that the greatest thing would be to be in the 9th inning of the World Series on the road and quiet the stadium, not win it with a walk-off. But so I don't mind. I don't mind it. But it was always weird that the odd time somebody would sort of show me something, and I'm like, that's interesting. That's why I did that and that and that. I actually thought it was for a different reason. And who am I? I'm only the guy living in the body. And I'm only the guy that basically knows why I'm doing it. But interesting that person outside. So I always thought it was silly for people to attribute reasons for why I do what I do. And so I go, I'm not going to do it to anybody else. Right. So I usually go, here's why I quit Marvel. Yeah. Here's why I like baseball. Here's why I'm not religious. Here's why I like broccoli. And I'm not saying at any time that any of those choices are better than any other human being's choices. Never. Sure. I've never said that. I'm just saying, you asked me the question. I'm telling you why I did it. I am not saying you should do it. Yeah. Right. Like, you go find your own path. Here's why I did it. Oh, by the way, if you happen to listen to some of the things that different people say, maybe myself included, and you can pick a piece that actually makes sense to you and your personality, and then somebody else says something and you can do that, then good on that person, right? So when I'm talking about myself, I'm not really sitting there aspiring to say, hey, I wonder if there's a guy named Dave that's going to listen, and then eventually I'm going to get him so excited he's going to start a podcast. None of that's there. If it happens, it's great. It happened, it's great, right? Let's go back to your original question. Who inspired me? Had no idea they were. Yeah. They were doing what I'm doing. They're just, their heads down. They're living their life. They're doing their thing. And they had no idea there was this little Canadian kid sitting there looking at their pages going, oh man, if I could only do that. Oh, I'm going to practice. Like, they had the, okay. You hear it from people that are in movies and or TV and music and people say, the work you did inspired me or got me through a tough time or whatever, and it's always very gracious and it's always humbling when people say that, but it was never part of the process.
Of course.
I just want to make some cool music, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know that they're touching somebody in Indiana today who's having a tough time because their dad is beating them. They don't know that. So,
well, and that's the beauty of art. Like the encompassing beauty of art is that it can inspire, and it typically does. And so I just want to say,
let me simplify it too. Because again, talking about art and whatever can get pretty deep in the weeds.
Of course.
But it can be exclusionary because then people go, well, I don't want to be an artist. I don't want to be a writer. What are you guys talking about? I don't understand. Look, art to me is sort of can be boiled down to sort of one easy sentence, and it's a cliche sentence that's been around.
Sure.
If you're a person, then it basically the definition of art that I ascribe to is I don't know what art is, but I know what I like.
Yeah.
Period. So you don't have to understand what was going through the head of the person doing the creating, whether it's music, TV, and writing, books, whatever. You don't have to know any of it. You don't have to understand the 100 decisions that, in my case, I was making to put out that one book. All you have to do is say, I read it, and I either liked it or I didn't. I went to that movie, and I liked it or I didn't. I saw that TV show. I went to that concert. I liked it. That's enough. You're the one that's paying the money. You're the one that's giving your time. You get to actually be the arbiter of what makes you sort of and brings joy to you, right? I mean, that argument, Dave, also comes into the way that I've dealt for 30 years with any criticism, right?
Yeah.
And I say this with all sincerity, I don't give a shit. Right? I don't give a shit, right? And my answer to any critic for 30 years, not that I pay attention because I don't read I don't read the notes when I post something. But when I've been confronted the odd time by somebody who wants to get a little bit hostile, the answer has always been the same for 40 years now. Mm-hmm. You should spend your time and money on things you personally enjoy.
Of course.
I just solved it. I just solved your problem. If you don't like my stuff, then I would go and find stuff you like. Seems weird. You want to stand here and waste time because we're all going to die, and time's a precious thing. You want to spend time talking and about stuff you don't like and doing just go to the fun stuff. I don't know. It's weird. And then I've also said on the other side that if you really like my stuff, or a word that I don't use much. If you love my stuff, right? I love my wife and I love my kids, right? I mean, I keep love
tight. Yeah.
I keep it tight. I do not love pickles, and I do not love any movie, and I love my family. So I really like pickles. And I really like a lot of movies. So anyways, but people throw that word around, so we'll use it. But even if I do something that you love, again, I don't care. Yeah. I don't care because tomorrow I have to get the next piece of work done, and the next piece, I can't create looking for acceptance, right? And here's the thing, Dave. It already is happening, whether you know it or not, because I'm gonna get my sales reports of everything I do, and then you can easily tell whether people liked it or not. if your graph's going up, you can make an easy assumption.
Yes.
If the graph's going down, you go, man, maybe I'm doing something wrong. So,
all right, I want to show you something because one of the things in my collecting, and everybody that kind of watches this channel knows it, I'm trying to own every piece of published art that you've ever put forth, and that goes from the beginning. Yeah. So I don't even know what that would be. Well, and that's the thing, right?
People bring me stuff and I have forgotten I did it. So,
you ready to have your mind?
I don't know who's even got the list because it's not me. I couldn't even give you the list.
Well, I'm going to put together the list when I have everything, but I'm going to blow your mind because 1986 or 85, you gave Colin Upton a piece of art for one of his zines. Is there for Jam Up Spot?
See, that would have been one of the one I would have forgotten about.
Well,
that's so you're way hardcore, or you're a stalker. I don't know.
No, I'm just hardcore. Hardcore completist.
Anyways, it's like, okay, there, you just jolted me to something that I hadn't thought about probably for 30 years. So,
well, and Colin told me that you guys met in Vancouver, because I had asked him if there was a story behind it, and it's just the self-published thing. And I interviewed Eric a couple weeks ago, and he grew up in Bellingham. Larson, yeah. Okay. And we talked about graphic fantasy, and I was surprised that somehow you never got a copy of that. Not too far away, but did you have any other self-published things come out besides that? And obviously, your first piece of fan art published in
that's it. Journal. To me, that's the moment, right?
Okay.
That's like, oh man. And that was a big homage to Marshall Rogers' Batman at that time. Mm-hmm. I did I don't know if you've seen, I did a portfolio.
Right. The early years, I think it was called.
I don't know. It was when I was working at the comic shop.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called the Comic Rack. I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, the store is called the Comic Rack. And so I did a portfolio of about 4 or 5, 6 drawings that I sold for like $5. Right? Poor college kid. I don't know how many we printed. 50 or 100, I don't even know, right? So there's not that many of them around, but that was some amateur stuff that I actually printed on my own at that point. And then that one that was in the Comics Journal. The only other weird stuff, it wasn't artwork, was there's 4, 5, 6, 7 whatever comic books that I wrote letters, and they're in the back.
They're Action Comics, I believe.
Yeah, and stuff like Unknown Soldier and Ghost Stories and stuff like that. But Iraq, I think there's one in Iraq and stuff. But I'm trying to think, and here it is. Like, again, I'm always running forward. I forget mile 2. That I got the Comics Journal one, and then I did that portfolio, and then I was just sending off sample after sample after sample after sample, and I there's probably not that much in between.
Yeah.
Before I actually got, excuse me, the first professional job, right? But then what makes it difficult, maybe you're smarter than I am, but within that time, especially when I was at Marvel, they would just throw you like a page here or there. And they'd say, hey, you want to do a cover? You want to do an ad? Or do you want to do an intro? Like, it was, I don't even sometimes remember, I would draw stuff. I don't even remember what it was for, right?
Well,
I have this, I still have, I don't know why, but I have this big, giant drawing of, it's so big, my hands aren't even in. I got a big, giant drawing, probably the second biggest drawing I've ever done of Spider-Man when I was at Marvel. And I don't remember what it was for.
Huh.
Right? It was, in my mind, it was for some kind of ad. And maybe if I showed it to people, they would go, oh, Todd, that was blah, blah, blah. But I don't remember, other than I have the artwork. I know I drew it, but and they just said, Todd, you got to get it done. And I just did it and I sent it. And then I was back to my ongoing deadlines. And so you're not really chasing down your own artwork, right? So here we go. The biggest Spider-Man that I ever drew is the 2-page spread in Spider-Man #1.
Mm-hmm.
And the paper, and again, this is a detail that people might not care about, but a regular comic book is 10. We draw 10 inches by 15 inches. That's the border. That's the borders.
Mm-hmm.
But when we want to do books that bleed, which means the printing can go off to the side, then the pages got bigger. And I think that they were more like 12.5 by 17.5, whatever. They were, the pages were way bigger.
Yeah.
So by the time you did a 2-page spread and you glued 2 pages together, that was like another 5 inch. Like it was, so that 2-page spread in Spider-Man #1, which is page 2 and 3 of that issue, for whatever reason, I have, like, it's weird because I sold so many other things that I don't know why I kept it. but I have it. It's the single biggest Spider-Man I ever drew. So I'm like, oh, cool. That's a cool Spider-Man piece.
And yeah, and I know that you talked about it often. I think I even asked you on one of the Todd Talks on Discord, but yeah, the 300 last page I know you still have, and then that 2-page spread. I mean, look,
I've got a couple covers. I got some weird covers from Spider-Man. I got a hodgepodge of stuff. I just came across by accident the other day. I was looking for something. I'm like, hey, what's in this box?
Yeah.
And it was stuff from Infinity Incorporated, the Hulk, Spitfire, the first
Spitfire
I did there. I think some G.I. Joe pages maybe, and something out. But again, just to be clear, it was for the most part all the crappy pages I couldn't sell, because I used to take all my pages to the conventions and put them on the desk next to you while you're signing, and people would come and look at it and turn it over, and there'd be a price on it. The only thing that's sort of funny is to see how little I was selling it for. Right? You could have got some pretty sweet pages back then for like $100.
Well, we won't.
So I've got lots of pages. They're just not the sweet pages, but I've got, don't know why, the double page spread to Spider-Man #1. I've got the cover to, I think, Spider-Man 13, whatever. It's the Crouch. It's the Crouch, except for in the black costume. Right.
It was the Morbius storyline.
Right. Why that one? Why I kept that one? Don't know. I have a good guess as to why I kept this other page, which is I have the last page of Spider-Man 300.
Yeah.
And it's, Spider-Man in his red and black, and it says A New Beginning or something like that.
Yeah.
And to me, I think the reason I kept it was because that black costume meant nothing to me, to the point that we end up creating this character Venom I see behind you, just to get the costume off.
Sure.
So I think what it was finally, after 298, 299, and a double-sized 300, that when I drew that page, to me, I finally was drawing Spider-Man. Right? And me mentally, that's Spider-Man, classic Spider-Man. Oh my gosh. And I must have kept it just for that sentimental reason, no other reason. So.
Well, it's iconic. I mean, even more so iconic because of that story. And, it's the background in New York City. It's the snow. It's just the right page. And I could see why you kept it. Now, I won't mention how much I paid for these, but at least I can tell you I'm a steward of a couple of pages of yours from ASM. I got one from the
chameleon.
The chameleon in the burning Capitol building, and then when Mary Jane gets kidnapped, this is what, 309, I believe.
Yeah. So 309. Yeah, this is by 309. I'm starting to figure out inking, right? Because I began inking on a steady basis with Spider-Man 300. So it probably took about 10, 11 issues before I started figuring out inking, right? So, and to me, if you look at some of the early artwork in that 10 issue, you can see how it got refined, just like anything else. Your writing gets better, your artwork gets better, whatever else. But what would be curious, though, is like that one that doesn't have any Spider-Man on it, right?
Yeah.
If you pull it out of the sleeve, I usually wrote a price on the back of it. So what was
that's what I was going to mention. Is usually there is a price on the back. Let me take a look real quick here. It was crossed out, but wait, $25.
$25. That's it. Sometimes I cross it out and I go to 35. Right. So, but yeah, so that was a 20. Somebody bought that for 25 or $35 originally.
Yeah, I sure as hell didn't pay that kind of money.
Yeah, right. So I can't even afford my own stuff back. So,
and I want to jump into Spawn, but I do want to ask you a thing about ASM, and Kayfabe has pointed it out. But were you looking at a lot of Otomo when you started doing ASM, like the backgrounds, and there's just a lot that kind of, you can see the inspiration in there. Yep. And so what does Akira mean to you from a creator standpoint, but also from a fan?
I think a lot of creative people, doesn't matter what industry you're in, at times you come across stuff that just gobsmacks you.
Sure.
And you just, are so blown away, are so jealous, are like you can look at it over and over and over and over and over and never get tired of it.
Yeah.
I got introduced to Akira when I was visiting New York, and I was hanging out with some people that were inkers or inking. I mean, people that were like just beginning their careers,
Yeah,
a little bit like me. And somebody had from a Japanese bookstore, right? Like, again, let me just paint the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is before internet, before telephones, all like there's no easy way. And somebody shows me a Japanese comic book. I'd never seen one. And it was Akira, and it was bundled. It was like the trade fat trade version of it.
Yeah.
And it was all in Japanese, so I didn't know what was going on. But the visuals in it were staggering.
Yeah.
That like the back, like forget, just look at the backgrounds. It was staggering. And then somebody said, "Oh yeah, they come out with these every now and then." And so I think there was one that was the yellow cover, and one that was a pink cover, and one that was a green cover. But each one of them, I don't even remember how many issues there were. But I think if you collected 5 or 6 of them, and they would come out like once a year.
Yeah.
And the only place I could find them was this Japanese bookstore across from Rockefeller Plaza.
Oh.
And DC Comics was in Rockefeller Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
So if you went to DC, then you come down, you could cross the street, to go to this store. And it was a Japanese bookstore. But if you went upstairs and you went in the corner, right? I mean, comic books, like we're like the bastard children, right? You put them in your item. And if you went way in the corner, like, and you were lucky, there was one. And if the new one had come out, then they still had some of the old one, right?
Sure.
And you just go, oh man. So yes, and one of besides the backgrounds which just blew me away, one of the things that I sort of leaned on heavy was what I call speed lines, right? There's all these sort of lines. They were easy to do. It's weird because they're easy to do because you got a ruler.
Yeah.
But when you do a bunch of it, it looks like detail. It fills the page because it makes the panel or whatever look great. I mean, it's not the original version, but like behind you, I did it on that Venom cover, right? So that could have been plain, right? But I did this movement. Like all of that came from Akira, right? I mean, again, I found out that it was more of a Japanese thing, not necessarily an Akira thing. It was a Japanese, but I didn't know because I was
it was a manga thing.
Yeah, so I was just like, oh my gosh, and I thought that John Byrne and especially George Perez did the best machinery and detail.
Oh yeah.
And then I saw Otomo's book, right? And I'm like, wow. So Todd, you better pick it up. You better pick it up a little bit. So yeah, there was. I've said before that my style, and I think this is true probably for most people, is that you just sort of pick from 10 different people, and you go, I like that from that person. I like that from that person. And you take like 10 or 12 people, and you take a little bit, right? I like Marshall Rogers' capes, right? I like John Byrne's cape. I like George Perez's machinery, whatever. Tick, 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 tick. And then you take all these pieces and you put them in a blender, and then when you pour it out, that's your style. And it's this common. It's a culmination of all the things that worked for you. You're just jamming them into one place. And so it then becomes, it's not unique. It just becomes, in this case, Todd's style, right?
Sure.
At that point. And it was, okay, because those were the influence. And somebody else would give you probably pretty close to the same story and say, hey, there were these 10 people, 4 of them were really prominent in terms of their influence, but they just combine it all, and then they add a little bit of their own, and all of a sudden they end up having a look that nobody else has, which when you're swimming in a sea of competitors who are doing the same thing as you, trying to get a career in doing comic books, trying to establish their style so that you can recognize the style before you recognize the name. Everybody's trying to do that. So you have to, I felt I had to constantly struggle to try and set myself apart just for survival.
Yeah.
Just to go, I need to be in this business for a long time. And I guess it kind of worked. So.
Right. And, the seven of you took what you guys had and you formed Image Comics in 92. And obviously, we can look back at history right now, but at the time, I can't imagine that anybody was being like, oh, we're going to do this and this is going to change the comic industry forever. Because where we are now, if Image Comics doesn't exist, I don't know if comics exist. You guys created some competition that had to up the game for everybody else.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd go that far. What I would say is that if Image Comics never existed, the industry would be different for sure.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
We had an impact, and so people can argue good, bad, or indifferent what that impact was, but it was an impact, and it changed. It did change the course of where we were going. Again, what would have happened if we weren't there? I don't know. Maybe the industry would be 20 times better, maybe 20 times worse. I don't know. Yeah. But because we existed, we were part. We ended as the years, more importantly, the decades went by.
Sure.
We became part of the industry's fabric, right? Mm-hmm. And you just go, oh, okay. Of which we had no idea because we were all just leaving so we could just do our own cool comic books. That was the main goal. First and foremost, we just wanted to do our own cool stuff.
And that brings me to Spawn. And the first question, and I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this before. This guy.
Even better.
I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this before, but one thing that kind of goes under the radar about Spawn, issues 1 and 2, the promotional posters, you have Ken Stacy doing paints over your work. And it was just, where does that decision come from? I know he's a fellow Canadian. I don't know if there was a relationship, but never again, or before that, was there Spawn painted covers by Ken Stacy. And I just think it's something interesting because it's iconic. Absolutely iconic.
Well, I'll give you my recollection. And arguably Ken Stacy probably has a better recounting of it. So,
sure.
So get his version of it. At the time, I was living up in Canada on Vancouver Island, not to be confused with Vancouver, right? When you tell people Vancouver Island, they think Vancouver. Vancouver is on the mainland of Canada, on the West Coast. If you go off the West Coast, there's an island called Vancouver Island. I lived on Vancouver Island. Again, you tell people you lived on an island, people go, oh my gosh. But if you look at a world map, if you got a globe, Vancouver Island's on it. It's not an insignificant island. It's a big chunk. It's a big chunk of land, right? I think it's like maybe 600 kilometers from top to bottom. So it's a big piece.
It's big. It is.
Right. So I lived, sort of near the bottom, but at the very bottom of the island is a city called Victoria, which is the capital.
That's right.
Of British Columbia. So it's where Parliament is on the island. So it's not, again, it's not an insignificant island. And Ken Stacy lived in Victoria, and I was maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes up the road in another city. So Ken and I knew each other. We were, again, two people that are in the same industry. And so when the comic book came out, we were, again, we wanted to use computer coloring that was just starting to become a thing.
Yeah.
And some of the first stuff was actually in Marvel's reprinting of Akira. And Steve Olaf, and he had a company called Ole Optics. They did the coloring, so it was like, oh man, I'm going to phone Steve Olaf too, right, to do the coloring. Of Spawn, because like this computer coloring, combined with using sort of magazine quality paper, not newsprint. So we were going to do this sort of slick version moving forward, and I just thought that the cover should be slightly different too. Yeah. So I did the black and white, right? I mean, actually, there is an inked black and white inked version of that cover,
right?
And we printed it, I think, a couple times.
Malibu Sun.
Yeah. And then we did a blue line, and I gave the blue line to Ken Stacy, and I'd seen some of Ken's stuff. It was kind of cool. And I said, go, right? Go try it. See, I mean, it's an experiment. We'll see what it looks like. And he did it. I thought it was pretty vibrant and whatever. And then I go, hey, you want to do another one? And he did a second one. And I guess I had forgotten this, that, and it seems fair, that he has one of the painted covers and I have issue one. I have issue one. But he had issue two because he just sold it in an auction. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? I don't have that? I thought it was something. I thought I had all the Spawn stuff. But he was like, no. And I go, oh, yeah, okay. I probably said, hey, there's two of them. I keep one, you keep one. Mm-hmm. But after number two, and this is my own sort of bad personality, that Ken was doing a nice job, but I wouldn't see my artwork, like mm-hmm. my the little fine line work.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, let me just, what happens if I just get like Steve Olive to color it and see what it looks like? Because the pages on the inside were coming out, and then I'll get to keep whatever. And so I ended up doing that, and that was it. So Ken and I just sort of had a fleeting moment that ended up, being something that people, especially issue one, recognized immediately.
Sure.
But that was it. We had a little bit of fun with it. Yep.
Well, that's once again a story I'd never heard, so I had to ask it. And I think Ken did pretty well on that auction. I think it went for about $160,000 or so. But that's the power. It's also the power of your artwork and the power of the collectability of it.
I'm going to tell you a silly story.
Yeah.
One time I was doing a signing. I'm trying to think, it was a retailer thing or whatever. So mm-hmm. I thought, oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to pull something out of storage. And I pulled out the original painting of Spawn 1, that one we're talking about, this Ken Stacy one. And in person, it's vibrant, right? I mean, the reds are red. I mean, it's really vibrant. And I had it framed and whatever else, and I put it up on an easel and whatever. I don't know what happened. Something happened. I don't even know what the commotion. And then all of a sudden, the painting went down, and all you heard was just the shattering of glass. Now, if anybody's ever had a framed picture break and hit the ground, and I've had that happen a handful of times. Sometimes because of the way that it hits, the glass will literally slice the photo. Yeah. And you go, oh man, I'm gonna have to go get another photo because the photo's ruined. And when that thing fell and the sound and there's glass, I looked at it. I remember there was a pause, and everybody that was in line, right?
Yeah.
It was right before we got in line. I don't know if it was a fan that knocked it over or whatever. And there was this hush of like,
yeah.
Oh, and I remember slowly picking it up. I go, raise it so that, again, no glass gets on. And I turned it, and it was like, what? And there's now that I tell you the story, there's one little nick in it, right? But considering what could have happened.
Yeah, right? Wow.
That I just was like, wow, we dodged a big artistic bullet on that one, because that could have been the cover to Spawn 1 is no longer in existence, right? So, so after that, I put it in a frame with no glass.
Yeah, there you go.
So I go, okay, so that ever happens again, and I've sort of kept it hidden off to the side. Anyway, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, we've lost a lot of art to time and to carelessness. So,
well, Eric Larson to fire.
Yeah, to fire, and me and Eric talked about that, and it's I can't imagine what that was like. And before we go to Spawn 350, which is coming out, I did want to ask about one of the moments that I know you're really proud of in your career that you've told a bunch of times, but you inked over Kirby with Satan 6 and Phantom Force. Yep. And it's just one of those things. Was that one of those moments that you were kind of like, how this is really happening right now?
Yeah, think about it. I don't know what's the equivalent. So let's say you were you're a musician,
Mm-hmm.
and you always looked up to the Beatles, right? And then all of a sudden, at some point, the Beatles say, "Hey, do you want to open for us?" And then at some point in the concert, they go and they bring you on stage and say, "Hey, you want to do a couple songs with us?" Right? Yeah. First off, you would have been fine at that concert being in the third deck just watching it.
Of course.
And now you're going, man, I get to open, which is the inking part of it. But then it's like they're going to put it together, and then, like I said, eventually he ended up giving me some of the artwork back that I just like what? Like this is just getting better and better, and it's the Beatles. In my case, it's Jack Kirby. It's Jack Kirby,
Sure.
the king, right? And what's weird is that no matter what you did up to that point in my career, like that's post Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh, like I've climbed the top of the hill. Right? Up to that point, you're like, I'm just doing my thing. But man, I got to do stuff and hang out with Jack Kirby. It's like, oh man, this, like, it doesn't get better than that. So I don't know. There are these silly moments that are, I think, precious to each of us that we have, I would argue we, in our collections, we all have things that have way more sentimental value to us personally than what you would sell it for on eBay.
Yeah.
Right? You get $12 for it, but it's worth $1 million to you. Right. I mean, you wouldn't even sell it for $1 million. You go, no, man, that reminds me when I was 8. So it was one of those moments for me, right? That and doing a little bit of inking on the Dark Knight. So
yeah, that's right. And a story that you just told on Kayfabe. Speaking of precious moments, and I'm not expecting you to remember, but if you see over my shoulder here, there's this great sketch done by this guy Todd McFarlane of this guy Venom, and you did it for me in the NHL store in like 2012 or something like that.
Wow.
It was a signing.
I didn't know if you bought that or I gave it to you. So
no.
Yeah. So no, I remember the signing because I only did the one.
Yeah.
It was a weird signing. I was at the NHL store in New York, and they were like, "Oh yeah," and they thought everybody's going to come bring their NHL toys. Instead, everybody bought their comic books. Well, you must have got me. I don't usually do sketches, so you must have got me at a weak moment.
I remember I tell the story. I asked you, you looked at your son. I think it was Jake would have been with you. And he just was playing either a Game Boy or PlayStation, a PSP. And he just said, oh, and he went back to his video game. And you're just like, okay. Because there was, right, like you said, there wasn't a ton of people there. It was a weird signing. It was like 5 o'clock on a Tuesday,
Yeah, the hockey store. So it was like, oh, okay, I have time. I don't do a lot of sketches. Right?
No.
I probably
you prefaced it with that.
30 in my career. Like I don't do a lot, right?
Yeah.
And usually it's because some cute little kid's in front of me, and I'll do one for a cute little kid. But for the most part, I've got a lineup, and I need to continue signing.
Sure.
So I can't stop and do them. And plus, like you said, I did it really quickly. My style's got a lot of detail in it, and my sketches can't convey that. And so I get frustrated at my own sketches. I go, nah, I'm not going to sketch because it doesn't even look like my stuff. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And that's one of the things that, anybody who's met you knows you're always good with the people who want to meet you, and you always give time. And I know you attribute a lot of that to the time you spent with Stan. And, I was at the Ace in Arizona where you did that panel with him, and it was great seeing the two of you together. And it's heartwarming to know that you took a lot of inspiration from somebody who is, obviously such a huge part of what we all love.
Probably the very first person who made an impact on me was George Perez.
Mm-hmm.
I was at my very first comic book convention ever. I drove down from Canada, and I think it was in LA or San Diego con, maybe, or I don't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But and there were a couple people that were there, and I admired, and I went to get an autograph, and I thought they were kind of rude, and I was like, I was sort of put off by it, and then I didn't understand. I remember walking away from especially one individual. And I was like, why would you fly from New York to come here to be rude?
Yeah.
Right? because before you came, myself and a bunch of people liked you, and now we don't like you as much. You would have been better off staying home, right? Because we would have still liked you.
Yeah.
But our likeness went down. George Perez that day was the opposite.
Yeah.
He was gracious. He answered your questions. He showed you stuff. He did. Because again, I always peppered the artist with questions because I was trying to break in, right?
Sure.
At this point, I'm 16, 17. And he was like showing me stuff. And I was like, oh man. And he was laughing. And then when I stepped to the side, he was doing it with everybody. So it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man. And I remember I have clarity. I've said it before. I have clarity. That day was the day that I said, if I'm ever in a position where I'm the pro, I want to be like that human being, and not that human being, right? So I don't get it. Okay, I give speeches sometimes, and I go to business classes, and I do a couple things with them, right? But one of the things I try to get across to them is, guys, let me just tell you a couple truisms. There's a couple truisms. Right? I think location, right? I mean, that's it, death and tax or whatever. And then I got another one. If you're going to be an asshole, and I know plenty of them,
sure,
you had better make money for somebody every day of your life. Because nobody willingly hangs out with assholes. Nobody, right? So you would better be great at something, and that either is making money or doing something. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Because the moment you lose and you stop making money for somebody, you're just an asshole. Nobody's coming to visit you, right? So I don't know. Or you could be like George, and you could be somebody who's making money for somebody and they're gracious. I don't know. Between the two, it seems like it's way easier and way more, better long term, and it had an impact on me at 16. And then I just saw it on other people. And then Stan Lee, to me, was just the best I ever saw at it, because his demands were so great.
Yeah.
And he still was able to be gracious over and over and over, 20 seconds at a time for hours on end, sometimes for 4 days.
Yeah.
So it's I was fortunate to be around what I thought were good people to lead by example.
Well, I mean, he and every time I've met you, it's been the same. You are always the professional and the person that cares about the people that are buying the things that you put out. And
here's the piece I've never forgotten. Maybe this is me being Canadian.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, we don't try and get too high on a horse. I understand that I don't have a career if people don't give me their hard-earned money.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm indebted to my fans, because without them, I have no career. I may have talent. I don't know.
Sure.
I may have something, but it doesn't translate into a career unless people then give you commerce. Right. And so, and here's the reason why that's so important to me, because for the most part, the only way you can get money is if you're at work. And the way you get money at work is, for the most part, you have to leave your friends and family. So every dollar you make is time away from your friends and family, people you could give a shit about. Yeah. And yet that time that you were away from your family, that it's like, man, that's precious. That dollar matters. You go, I'm going to give $1 to Todd. So to me, that dollar is valuable because it was time away from the things that are important to human beings. And yet you took some of that and you gave it in my direction. So it's like, and I've been able to have a 40-year career out of it. Like I never forget that piece. So yes, in all honesty, I go to conventions and I'll sit there all day long and I'll sign. And then the people who put on the convention, hey, Todd, let's go out for dinner. No, right? I mean, no, it's okay. I appreciate that you gave me a desk or whatever else, but I'm tired and I've been doing this all day and I'm going to go get a good night's rest because I got to do it again tomorrow, right?
Sure.
The reason that there's people at the show, for me and for you who are putting on the show, is because of these people that are fandom. They're the priority, right? And they have to be the priority. At least they are for me. And so I treat it like that. Everybody is sort of second. I'm at a convention. Everybody's second to whoever's there, the fans. So,
well, that's a great philosophy. And let's just jump into 2024 for you, because you have a big year that you've already slated out, besides the stuff we don't know about. But you've got 7 new titles coming out with the Spawn, in the Spawn universe. You've got issue 350 coming out next month, which is, I mean, it feels like yesterday was 301.
Yeah, I've got to get the book to the printers tomorrow. So tomorrow is a all day just marathon. We got to get the book out to the printers, buttoned up by, I think, 7:00 tomorrow night.
Wow. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. You've also got the DC Multiverse toys, some new partnerships with Hasbro doing the Page Punchers, Transformers G.I. Joe. And then obviously the one that, you know, you want to happen more than anything else is hopefully a movie announcement with a release date, maybe a little behind the scenes or whatever that we're going to get. Have you read the script yet?
No, not the full script. No.
Okay.
But I did have a sit down 2 days ago with the writer in person.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 writers, but you know, the one leading the charge right now is Scott Silver.
Yeah.
The one that wrote. I mean, he's written. If you look at his IMDb, he's written some of my favorite movies. But the one that most of the fandom will know is Joker 1 and Joker 2, right? Joker 2 is going to be, I think, a big hit.
Sure.
Because, and again, I admire what Scott and Todd Phillips are trying. Instead of resting on their laurels, they're going to try something different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I always admire people who don't take the safe road. They sit there. And so Scott is just hell-bent in trying to call together with the other writers a script that is deserving of all the time all of us have sort of put into it. He's been there for a long time too.
Sure.
He jumped on before COVID. And so he's been there now for 4 or 5 years himself. So he's like, no, I'm not gonna like let this go until it's like perfect. I feel great about it, right? And so, but every time I go there, he always showing me stuff on the screen, and I'm like, all I look at is the page count, and I'm like, so, you know, it's one of these weird things that they write like first drafts and then they fix it and do whatever. It's sort of like us in penciling where you do like a rough and then you pencil and then you ink. And so, you know, eventually you get there. Right. Yeah. So there, I mean, that gap of like being done is getting, and I, like I said, I'm seeing it. I bet I saw it because I look at the page count. So I'm going, okay, cool. But he's just like, there's a couple things that are, I've got to just get right. Yeah. And I admire that he's like, I just got to get right. I got to get it right. But he goes, but I don't, if I can figure it all out tomorrow and get it done tomorrow, fine. But if it takes another month and a half, 2 months, fine. Like I don't want to just have an arbitrary deadline, right? I just need to make it right. And so I admire the goal of what everybody's aiming for, which is to do the best we can. And we spent this much time and we've sort of stretched it out this much time, right? Like what's a little bit longer or shorter? And again, he may figure it all out tomorrow or not, but he's just like, Todd, when it's ready, you'll be the first one to read it for sure, right? So like in its totality, not just like, I'm going to tease you with this and this and this. So, but I have full confidence in what we're going to get, and he's not playing it safe either.
I can't imagine.
Again, he's on the same page as me that we can't do Marvel White.
No.
We can't. We have to, after all this time, we have to deliver something that matters, that's evocative, that's unsafe, right? That maybe even the studios, the first time they read it, might go, "Are you sure?" Right? Are you sure? But again, the track record I'm hoping is there, right? Yeah. So he's got all those great movies. Got $1 billion R-rated movie. Nobody's ever done that.
No.
And who knows what Joker 2 does? Might be $2 billion movies. Who knows? So when they go, "Are you sure?" His answer will be, and our answer, because we're going to all be on the same page, will be, yes, we're all sure. That's why we're here. This script, this team. If you say yes, we go into pre-production tomorrow. If you like, we're ready. We don't want to convince. We don't want to develop. This is a go project. Those people, that script. Do you want to go? And we'll see how it all plays out. It's hard for me to imagine that something big and positive doesn't come out of it. It's just, I'm so used to toys and comic books. This Hollywood time frame is frustrating at times, but it's normal. It's just normal.
Yeah. And I got to imagine it's different. I mean, look, Spawn's got a proven track record in the eyes of the fans. You got the comic, but also the animated series. That is still one of the greatest landmarks for comic book characters ever, is the HBO animated series. And to me, as a moviegoer, and I would imagine a lot of people agree with me, make something with that kind of vibe in a live action, we will run to see it. There are droves of us 40-something-year-olds that grew up with this character that want it to be dark. We want it to be what we thought it was when we were kids. Like, there's nothing that needs to be changed about the vibe.
No, I agree. And all that will be said in advance.
Sure.
That 1994, when the first movie came out, they said that 75% of the people who went to that first movie were 14 or older, right? Which not only means that they're all old enough to go to an R-rated movie, it means that if anybody was born the day it came out,
they're old
enough to go to an R-rated movie. The majority of the people that I think will respond to this character, and I know this from data on the comic book toy end of it, are people that can get into an R-rated movie.
Sure.
So it's not like you're giving away something and going, "Oh man, we're going to lose the kids." The kids were never part of it in a big, meaningful way anyways. If anything, I would argue if you try to go get the kids, that would be the disservice.
Of course.
Right?
100%.
The crowd is us. And we want that thing that's aged up with us. That's what we want. And everybody on the movie and on the team understands that right now, right? Again, hopefully the studio that we sell to, otherwise we won't, will understand it. And they'll go, "Oh, okay, so this isn't Captain America." No, it's not. And if you're going to try something different, then I think this character allows you that freedom to do it.
Yes.
Right? So when I was talking to Scott the other day, he was asking me questions, right, trying to solve some problems in the script. Not that the problem in the script, but like trying to unlock a wow, right?
Yeah.
And I just go, well, what are you thinking of, right? And then I'll tell you sort of some of the things I've done in the comic book, but I've tried to create and spawn this latitude where no matter what you decide, I can make it work, right? There's really not that many hard and fast rules to Spawn and his powers and the world and all this stuff. It's part of the growth of the 30 years.
Yeah.
To the point we get to 350. So that's it. So I'm like, you tell me what you think. I'll give you some options. You figure it out, and we'll just make it work. We'll just make it work. Like, go, do what you think is best for the movie. Don't worry about what is best for continuity to the comic book fans, myself included. Don't think of it that way. That's a tail wagging a dog, right? Just do the best movie you think you can, and then let's start with that. And he is, and they are, and so is Jason Blum and everybody else. Everybody wants that same thing. So fingers crossed, we'll have that dynamic, just depending on like when we want to sell it.
Sure.
Right? When's it ready, and when do we want to sell it? And what are we selling? Are we selling Spawn, or are we selling Spawn's universe? Right? Those are two big, dramatically different conversations. So all that's going to be sorted out here this year for sure.
And I think it's safe to say, since 301, like the print runs, I'm fascinated by the print runs, and that's another conversation for another time. But as a collector, getting those issues from 200 to like 260 are a pain in the ass because they were, below 20,000. But I think where we are right now, at least from my standpoint, and I'm hoping it's yours, like Spawn's kind of gone through another generation of resurgence, after 301 and putting him in Mortal Kombat and putting him in Call of Duty. I mean, so it's really safe to say, like, there's a lot of people craving for more, and we all look for the movie or the TV show type thing to kind of have that conversation with our friends about, not all of us.
Dave, here's one of the things I've noticed, Dave, that, and I don't go to a lot of shows, so it's limited data points. But I'm starting to see that next generation.
Yeah.
And the majority of them, to be fair, are people who say, oh, my uncle loved your toys or your comic or HBO or whatever it was. Or my dad or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and like any brand, we pass it down to our kids, just like, if you like the Los Angeles Dodgers, you're probably going to try and get your kids to like them, especially if you live in the LA area. So brands are the same way. It's why Star Wars is so giant that everybody saw it, just kept pushing it down, going, I'm going to get a Star Wars bib for my baby. I'm going to start early. But I'm starting to hear that, like the younger generation was devoid there for about a decade, because it was just like us old guys who like were there at the beginning of Spawn Revolution, and we sort of went up, and then it's like, but we're now young, and there's things called iPhones and cell phones and internet, and you guys are like, whatever. But it's now gone to 30 years plus, so that the people that were like 15 or 45 and their kids are now pushing 20.
Yeah.
Right? And they're all converted geeks. A lot of them are converted geeks. And those that like certain stuff are pushing it down. So the Spawn people are doing no different than anybody else on any other brand, are pushing it onto their kids. And I'm now getting kids, and I use kids loosely, between the ages of 10 and 25, are coming saying, oh man, I really dig Spawn, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and they didn't get the HBO, although they get to watch it now because they got streaming. They get to still see it. So it's an interesting piece. We'll see, because if that's true, and that continues, and they've been procreating as much as I would like them to, and that means the possibility of the opening of the Spawn movie could be even bigger, because I wasn't including them in the opening. The next generation, right? I've always said, hey, on any given day, I got 1 million people, right? I'll bring 1 million people. 1 million people are going to come to the opening in America. Most people usually go with somebody. So they'll get a friend. They don't have to, the second person doesn't have to be a Spawn fan. They just have to be somebody that is part of the circle.
Yeah.
So Spawn fan, 1 million, and they bring a date. That's 2 million. 2 million at choose your number. I don't care. Choose your number. $10, $20, whatever you want to do. So if it's a $20 ticket times 2 million, that's 40 million without anybody else other than the geeks. I've always said this. I go, dude, the first 25 to 30 million are mine, right? Yeah. They're my geeks. They're coming. What are you going to do for me? And then studios then have this big infrastructure, hopefully, to bring another to match. So if you can get 25 and 25, that's a big opening. If you can get 30 and 30, that's a big opening. And if you get really lucky and it goes bigger than that, then all of a sudden you've got a smash hit on the way, and all the sequels and stuff are coming, right? And then what comes out of that, depending on the deal, if they've got the animation or they can do TV rights or whatever else, if they buy some of the other characters, do we go into production doing Gunslinger, right? I don't know, right? Who knows? There's still all this to be debated, vetted, and eventually answered contractually and legally. So.
Well, my vote for a Sam and Twitch animated series. That's what I want to see after the Spawn movie. And I'm excited for the book. Sam and Twitch. Yeah, Sam and Twitch was one of my favorite books when it came out, when Bendis was writing it, and I'm really excited to see what you do with it. You've got Tales of
the Sam and Twitch is for people who might not be into superhero stuff. Then don't worry about it. You know, you don't have to like Spawn. I got a book for you.
Yeah,
right. It's just true detective. Here's a true detective book, and you don't have to know one thing about Spawn. Done. Yeah. You can still buy it. So I'm trying to put some of the new books we're coming out with. I'm trying to make as many of them diverse.
Sure.
From sort of what people know as Spawn, because I don't want to just do Spawn over and over and over. I want to do detective. I want to do humor. I want to do sci-fi. I want to do things that are in the past that maybe are historical. I want to do superhero. Forget if it has anything to do with hell or heaven. It's just superhero.
Right.
And then put all that out there and just let the audience decide what, if any of it, is to their liking, and let them choose. So, but the Sam and Twitch, I'm quite proud of it, because it just feels gritty and real. So.
And that is the world that Spawn came up in, and it's kind of what I'm really excited for that. And then the Dark Ages with Liam Sharp. I mean, Liam Sharp's on another level, so I can't wait to see what he's putting out. But before I let you go, I do want to mention I want a pitch, but not a comic book pitch. If you ever need somebody to help you run your whatnot and kind of go around the warehouse with you and talk about stuff with you, I'll get on the first flight down to Arizona and come do that with you. Because I think some of the stuff that you've shown off on the whatnot, my mind is getting blown, and you're like kind of glazing over it because there's so much stuff. Yeah. But I think the more we see of the archive of Todd, the more we're going to really, really love the fact that you are the shepherd of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we'll see. I think our next thing on whatnot is going to be a charity event.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, that I see it as being a community spot, not necessarily a direct money making spot, right?
Yeah,
It has that element, and I know most people use it for that. I'm in a position where I can think about it in a little bit more varied sort of way. So we can just have fun, do community, raise some money, and or get money that is for charity. All the above, right? All the above. So we'll see how it goes. Because I do have a lot of stuff, and it's just a lot of it's collecting dust a little bit, and I know that to the right people there's a value there. So can I unlock some of that value and not put it in my pocket, but give it away to people, and see if we can, as a community, help sort of raise some money and for good causes.
All for it. And I think that's a beautiful way to do things, is just give back to people and then give a chance for people to own that stuff while giving back. And the last thing I want to tell you is the first episode I ever put on this channel, I said 4 words, and those 4 words have stuck with me. They've become a mantra on this channel, and that is see Todd, buy Todd. And I created these stickers. I'm going to send you a couple of these, but it's one of those things that, like, I am a comic seller. That is what I do, but I like to just, the things that I love, I share with people, and your art is one of those things that is shared a sentiment among almost every single person that's subscribed to this channel. So I just, this, and then obviously we created this sticker just to kind of throw in with people.
My mom doesn't even do that. Man, thanks.
Well, I just, would it be possible to get you to just repeat the slogan?
Sure.
All right.
Everybody, this Todd McFarlane, as you guys all know, there's only one mantra that you all need to know. That's that one over there. See Todd, buy Todd.
Todd, my God, thank you so much. You don't understand what this means. And I really hope I can have you back on the channel, because we didn't talk about Pearl Jam or Korn or Ozzy or any of these amazing things.
We didn't really talk about 350, in all honesty. So.
I want to get into the weeds on 350. I mean, do you want to just, well, look, Spot, the throne is empty. There needs to be a new king of hell. Double-sized issue, right?
Double-sized issue, 40 pages, $4.99. So if nothing else, you get an anniversary book. You get 40 pages, $4.99, which is the rate that a bunch of books are going for 20 pages. So I'm giving you 2 for the price of 1 in some respect. And it's being, the artwork is Brett Booth and who's going to be the new artist and who's never done Swan, and he's an artist, and a chapter by Carlo Barberi, who's given us the last 30 issues. So and Corey, the writer, Corey McConville, is doing his usual terrific job. I mean, I think it's a value. I think it's a value, right? I mean, it's high quality with a lot in it, with answering some big questions at a fair price. And the answer to the story puts a period on one arc and begins a new arc because of it. So it's sort of like a beginning and an ending, that issue. So I keep saying for sort of lapsed readers or new readers or whatever, it's oddly a pretty damn good jumping on point, 350, because it has an effect moving forward. So, and
it was an arc technically that's 150 issues long, because 200 was where the 100, yeah,
250. The throne has been abdicated for 250 issues, but you don't have to have read that. You just have to know, oh, now I'm going to read it. The throne will be sat upon again, and that finally basically solves that 250 issue gap, and the answer has repercussions moving forward.
Right.
So, oh, cool. So there's sort of, I get the joke in the beginning of the next spin-off miniseries, if you will, however, using TV vernacular, like right there in one issue for $4.99, right?
Well, and value-wise, I mean, if you look at the cover prices of some books these days, $9.99, $6.99, $8.99, so thank you for keeping your prices pretty much as low as you possibly could for 30 years. That is not something businesses do. Nobody sets out and says, I'm going to try and make this affordable for 3 decades. It's more like, no, we're just going to keep exploiting people. But thank you, Todd, and
here's the reality. Costs have gone up.
Of course.
Which basically means the profits are going down. So, at some point I may be forced to have to go up a little bit, but hopefully people will see that, I was being fair-minded for a couple of decades. So if I have to go up a little bit, they'll give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm not trying to pick their pocket.
No. And I don't think anybody, if they look at it and really think about it, I mean, look, just to give you a little comparison. I was going to New York Islanders games when I was 14 and I was paying $17. If I went to a New York Islanders game today, it would be $95 just to get in the building. So, keeping the prices down for us is a big thing. So 7 titles, 350 comes out in February. Movie news hopefully soon. DC Multiverse and all of the McFarlane toys are going to keep rolling out with some great stuff. I'm excited to get my 423 statues soon. And anything else? What else we got?
No, it's plenty for now. Our calendar is going to get, I think, quite full and meaningful during 2024. And then when it's over, you start all over again and you plan for 2025.
Yeah. But thank you, Todd, so much for your time and for everything, period. End of statement until this point. I'd love to have you back on at some point soon and we can talk more about everything.
All right. You be good.
All right, Todd. Take care, man.
Bye.
Well, that was an absolute highlight of my life and technically a highlight of my career. And we're just getting started with interviews here. So, if you don't have the time to watch them on YouTube, just listen to them. It's really what's being said that matters, not the faces, because we're just a bunch of people. I want to say thank you to everybody listening to this. This is now the 4th episode of the podcast. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so right now. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, leave a review, whether it's the star review on Spotify or words on Apple. I don't know what Amazon and Google and the other podcast platforms offer, but if you can review it, that would be great. Follow me on YouTube, West Coast Davengers. You can find all the links in the description below. I'm also on Instagram if you want to connect and say hello. But I really just appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to have so many more interviews that I'm trying to get. So fingers crossed for all that. And once again, this has been another episode of Direct Edition. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me podcast I desire. Ooh, yeah.